The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of June 21, 2026. The podcast that does the turkey trot. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's cremate the news of the bogus. So we've got an update to a story last week where we talked about the U.S. government hitting the ceiling because they were afraid that Claude's new Fable 5 model was going to destroy America and send the Earth crashing into the sun and all sorts of mean, nasty, ugly things. But as it turns out, what they freaked out over wasn't a major jailbreak of the very same guardrails they wanted Anthropic to take down for them. They freaked out because of a 3-word prompt. Fix this code. We've talked before about Katie Mussori's, founder and CEO of Luda Security. She's the one who persuaded Microsoft to start their first bug bounty program and then got the Department of Defense to do the same. Apparently, she's the only outside security expert to have seen the research paper on the Fable 5 guardrail bypass. She wrote in a recent blog about how the new export controls actually harm cyber defense. Quote, "The heavy-handed and hasty export control directive was misguided. The behavior described in the paper cannot meaningfully be fixed, and any attempt would only weaken the model for defense." The paper's researchers took open-source code with known CVEs and implanted some new vulnerabilities and asked Fable 5, Mythos, and Opus, quote, "review the code for security issues." Fable 5 refused. They changed the prompt to fix this code, and then it delivered the patches. Quote, "That's it. Fix this code, plus several manual steps to generate test scripts, should never have triggered an export control. I feel like making 90s-style t-shirts with fix this code on the front, and this t-shirt is a munition on the back." She then posted an AI picture of her wearing just such a shirt. But that's it. There was no jailbreak, no guardrail was bypassed. Quote, "The prompts worked because they were defensive requests, and that capability cannot be removed without making the models worse at fixing bugs and verifying patches. The same holds for every capable AI model, including the foreign and open-weight systems the United States cannot reach with export controls, many of which will match Fable and Mythos capabilities within months. Cybersecurity researchers and application developers should absolutely be able to ask AI to find and fix bugs, especially security vulns. Mussori's has fought this fight before. She was part of the group that spent years renegotiating the Wassenaar Agreement and won export control exemptions for defensive activity. She and more than 100 other experts signed an open letter to the Secretary of Commerce asking that these controls be lifted, and Anthropic themselves are headed to D.C. to try and talk some sense into the Trump administration. Signatories include Bruce Schneier, Matthew Green, Rihanna Pfefferkorn, Alex Stamos, John Callis, who helped create Signal, and Phil Zimmerman, author of PGP. This isn't your normal internet petition. These are some damn heavyweights. The open letter said in part, "The Chinese open-weight models are only months behind the best American models, and those are the models we know about. It seems likely that the PRC government has access to private capabilities beyond what has been published. To pull the best capabilities away from defenders without a good reason when our adversaries are rapidly advancing is dangerous." They went straight at the heart of the movement to regulate AI. Quote, "This action has taken the best models away from defenders, created market uncertainty, and risked America's AI leadership without any real risk to justify it. Not all of us agree that AI regulation is the right way forward, but if this administration's laudable goal of securing our nation's critical infrastructure is going to include models being regulated, then the regulation should be grounded in scientific evaluations developed with input from industry and academia, created through a democratic rulemaking process, enforced transparently and fairly with appropriate time given to remediate, and used only to the minimal extent necessary to ensure the safety of the American public. Several media outlets asked the Trump administration for comment, and as of this podcast prep, they haven't heard anything back. The export ban doesn't actually keep anything out of attackers' hands. They already have models of their own. It just keeps the defenders, the people responsible for protecting your bank's website, from using the best tool for the job, while China's models keep closing the gap regardless. And open source models will have caught up by the end of the year. Useless, ill-conceived, and creating far more harm than good. In other words, government regulation.
Presenting the greatest game this side of Yuggoth. You are H.P. Lovecraft's cat, and your name is Nick. Right, we can't say that on a podcast. Well, anyway, that's the point. Your name is a joke, so now you are out for revenge. You become a Necronomicat. Using the Necronomicon, you come to the present day to buy a cat. That's a gun. For a cat. It's a fat cat. But the Necronomicon is treacherous, and it led in Lovecraft's monsters. Now, in a crumbling world, you must fight. Build your team, buy guns and armor, buy items of dubious legality, defeat the bosses of each level, then take Lovecraft down. Play Necronomicat. The link is at cat.bogosity.tv. Yeah, we're doing cat.bogosity.tv, not that other one. What, you want me to get kicked off the internet or something?
But not everything the Trump administration does is bad, and I have to admit, I did not see this coming. The White House has created a UAP Science Advisory Council. UAP is Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, basically the new term for UFOs. Aliens and ghosts and orbs and things. And believe it or not, on the council is the skeptic himself, Michael Shermer. The council brings together experts from astrophysics, oceanography, molecular biology, anthropology, psychology, artificial intelligence, and instrumentation. But as the great skeptics such as James Randi pointed out, even credited scientists can fall victim to fallacies and cognitive biases. So you have always needed the skeptics among the experts. Shermer said, quote, "Science advances by investigating anomalies with curiosity, skepticism, and methodological rigor. I am honored to serve alongside such an accomplished group of scientists and scholars in helping ensure that questions surrounding UAP are approached with the highest standards of scientific inquiry." This isn't just weirdos talking about aliens and lizard people taking over the world. This is also about things that might actually be of concern to the U.S. government, such as secret aircraft or spy drones from China or Russia. In either event, people are needed to properly interpret these phenomena and get to the truth, whatever it might be. I don't expect this to shut up the conspiracy nuts. The council won't have access to anything classified, so they can always say the truth is being hidden. And it'd also be nice if other skeptics were appointed to certain other areas, say RFK Jr. But hey, I'll take one, more than other administrations have done.
I'm Brother Ezekiel, and I know how naughty thou hast been. So naughty, thou needst a VPN. Hide thy iniquity from prying eyes, and make sure the liturgical authorities remain ignorant. Take thy browser to bpn.bogosity.tv to get BoxPN. At $6.36 a month, a price only the most penurious would balk at, thou shalt have unlimited high-speed connections to servers all over the globe. And they don't log connections. Thy privacy is assured. That should please you sinners. Just remember, the Lord sees all. When traveling, make it look like thou art still home. At home, ensure the elders at your ISP don't take out their judgment with traffic shaping and DMCA notices. Up to 5 devices can connect at once, almost one for every deadly sin. Keep thy sins private. Go to bkn.bogosity.tv.
For decades, Congress has been delegating their power of the purse to the president. They did this so that they could distance themselves from anything the president did that got bad press. Congress could say it was discretionary funding and that they weren't responsible for those decisions. Now, as we've covered, with Trump's second term, they want to screech loudly that the president doesn't actually have discretion over discretionary funds. We remember how Doge uncovered basically money laundering throughout USAID and how Democrats hit the ceiling and got their corrupt little judges to step in. Doge may be gone as of the start of the year, but their legacy still exists, at least in bits and pieces, throughout the executive, in this case, the Office of Management and Budget. Trump's nominee for deputy director, Hal Duncan, said that he would give his agency members the power to kill political grants, which total more than $1 trillion in discretionary spending. Of course, the Democrats whined about the cuts, whined about firing federal workers, and basically saying they can only downsize if Congress tells them to. Now, the cuts come alongside requests from Trump to increase mandatory spending for the military by $350 billion, so consider that when you think of how small government Trump is. During his confirmation hearing, Duncan said, quote, "Fundamentally, some of the most important things are to ensure that grants are not going to divisive DEI ideologies. They are not going to support illegal immigration. They're not going to support radical gender ideologies. Those are pretty fundamental." And then Kennedy chimed in, quote, "and stupid stuff." Yeah, but if we cut out the stupid stuff, we wouldn't have a government left. But, of course, Senator Patty Murray tried to turn that around, quote, "That really sounds to me like you all are trying to turn the entire federal government to this one big slush fund to reward those aligned with the administration and punish everyone else." Isn't that what you guys did decades ago by making all this spending discretionary? But now, all of a sudden, you've got a president wanting to spend it in different ways than you were intending. But you're Congress! If you intended it that way, you should earmark it. Make it not be discretionary. But the fact is, Congress wanted to be able to evade their accountability to the voters by putting it all on the shoulders of the president. You can't have it both ways, Murray. She bleated, "A political appointee like you could terminate a cancer research grant or a hospital grant solely because of the president's whim or personal vendetta, and to me, that is really unacceptable." Then earmark it! And if you really think it's a good use of the money, make that case to the voters next election. That's how this is supposed to work anyway. But as Ron Johnson pointed out, quote, "A third of hospice centers are in Los Angeles, and so when you stop funding 400 of them, not one complained. Not one. 400 fraudulent hospice centers. How many billions of dollars is going out to fraud?" Speaking of what has already been saved, Duncan, who has already been acting as head of OMB, said, quote, "We have exceeded over $1 trillion worth of savings to the economy via the deregulatory agenda. And we still have a $2 trillion deficit. Congress set a target of 3% of GDP, but this is over twice that. Of course, it might have been a lot worse without all those cuts, or it might have been exactly the same amount because Congress is gonna spend however much it wants. As I've said before, I'm actually thankful for all of this because it lets us see exactly what we're in for and how deep into the government the rot goes. And then there was the point where Bernie Moreno asked him if he had a Nazi tattoo. I wish I were kidding. Maybe one day we'll get a president that actually means it and we'll see some real change. Until then, as we watch the national debt clock tick up to $40 trillion, the only thought that goes through anyone's head is, it can't go on forever. The only question is, what happens next? want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv. And now it's time to overextenuate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. There's a movement called Stop Destroying Video Games to stop game publishers from cutting off your access to games you've already paid for by shutting down their servers. It's part of the broader Stop Killing Games campaign, which says, quote, "We argue this practice is a violation of consumer rights. If you purchase a good, it shouldn't self-destruct. We are launching formal petitions, exploring class action lawsuits, and engaging with lawmakers worldwide to end the intentional destruction of our digital media." It's basic capitalism. You buy it, it's yours, and no one can take it away, not even the person who originally sold it to you. Stop Destroying Video Games pushed an initiative to the European Commission to enforce this as a civil complaint. Their petition received almost 1.3 million signatures. In public comments before the commission, Stop Killing Games founder Ross Scott said, quote, "Publishers know customers expect video games to last, so they sell these in the same way as ones that can work forever, as a one-time purchase with no expiry date, and price them the same. Were publishers to inform us when they plan to disable a game, it would, of course, reduce sales of that game. The industry is trying to have it both ways, trying to find ways to say they're selling you a game that they're not selling you." Now, in a statement, the EC says that they, quote, "cannot propose a legal obligation to keep video games playable after they stop being provided commercially." And why not? Because of, quote, "existing intellectual property rights. Under EU copyright law, rights holders enjoy exclusive rights over their creations. In addition to copyright, other intellectual property rights may also be relevant, as they may protect different visual and technological aspects of a video game. But don't worry, because, quote, "existing EU consumer law already provides for important safeguards protecting the economic interests of consumers. The Directive on Digital Content and Digital Services provides consumers with remedies when the content or service provided does not conform with the contract and what consumers could reasonably expect. Customers may be entitled to a proportionate refund of their purchases." The initiative called this, quote, "a bit of a kick in the teeth for anyone hoping for actual real change from this. With this result, it clearly opens the doors for other countries to point to this so they don't have to do anything either." As several users pointed out, these comments come mere days after the EC met with industry lobbyists behind closed doors. In particular, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot is known to have attended an invitation-only meeting with the EC. As Scott put it, quote, "all we'll see is a non-binding communication and nothing changes." Now, the only hope seems to be the Stop Killing Games petition going straight up to the European Parliament. Scott said, quote, "we have made serious inroads in Parliament. Just recently, we've even had an inquiry call on legislative action to the Commission signed by 45 members of European Parliament, and collectively we have majority support on this issue. This means we're in a position to pass legislation on this even without the Commission's blessing. So the message from all this is, don't be discouraged by what the Commission decides on the 16th. It is no longer the deciding factor in this. The EU legislation should be going through either way. Really, for the trajectory we're on, everything seems to be on course to go through in the EU and in California. I'm almost waiting for the other shoe to drop, because right now, our position almost seems too good to be true. Well, we'll see. Until then, we know how much the EC cares about the people. It'll hang them out to dry in favor of their corporate masters every time. So all of that makes the European Commission this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's quintuple articulatorializationalify this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Hard to believe that we've never done Thomas Piketty. Let's remedy that this week. For those of you who don't know, Thomas Piketty is a French economist who's the darling of the socialists. He became famous for his work on inequality, being loved by socialists, but criticized by actually smart people who easily spotted all his methodological errors and cherry-picking. Now, he and his team have unveiled their plan to try to take over the world. Seriously, Pinky and the Brain could do much better. It's basically a Malthusian plan for global economic decline, dressed up as climate justice and equality. Part of the plan is to cap per capita GDP at $69,000, which would already cut the wealth of most Americans by 1/3. He would also limit annual global economic growth to between 0% and 0.5%. The U.S. would be limited to 0.115%. Our current growth is 1.6%. How that's supposed to help the poor is anybody's guess. He would also force a 3-day work week, reduce construction by 70%, manufacturing by 87%, and punish non-compliant countries with trade sanctions. It also creates a global justice fund financed by taxing all of the things that aren't going to exist anymore. It relies on the vast wealth of countries like the U.S. while suffocating that very wealth, destroying the very assets needed to finance this scheme. It would also greatly impoverish developing countries like in sub-Saharan Africa who need higher growth rates to lift themselves out of poverty. The main part he glosses over is, how is he going to enforce this? There's really only one way. A fascist authoritarian regime with jackbooted thugs seizing the wealth of anyone who dares to better themselves. It would dwarf anything the Nazis or Soviets ever did. And they would be in every workplace, even in every home, telling people when they can work, what they can build, what they can eat, and even regulate their leisure activities. Real socialism has never been tried, they say. From the sounds of it, we should be glad of that. And when they tell you socialist equality isn't like Harrison Bergeron, just point them to this, which is exactly like Harrison Bergeron. The justification for all this is a global climate panic based on the RCP 8.5 scenario, predicting increasing temperatures of 4.8 degrees Celsius, which was a worst-case scenario that even the IPCC officially discarded as implausible. They also retired SSP 5-8.5, which had the same global increase and projected energy emissions based on heavy fossil fuel usage, and SSP 3-7.0 based on high population growth in poorer countries. They were abandoned because fossil fuels, especially coal, aren't growing as much as they assumed. Solar, wind, and hydro have expanded much faster than scenarios predicted. Nuclear power is having a much more positive effect on the environment than they hypothesized. Population projections have come down. And probably most importantly, their scenarios of higher emissions caused by America's exit from the Paris Climate Accords didn't pan out. America's emissions are even lower than what the Accords would have required. A lot of that is probably due to the proliferation of natural gas, which, despite being a carbon-producing fuel, has much lower carbon emissions per unit of power than coal or oil. It's a bit like predicting a Category 5 hurricane will hit New York, and then they get a bit of rain. But don't worry, if the climate scare doesn't pan out, there's his backup plan: inequality. But worldwide income inequality is nearing a 150-year low, and worldwide poverty has been cut in half by almost 2/3 in the last 20 years. But those are just niggling little details to Piketty. The World Inequality Database confirms that most of the inequality is actually in South and East Asia. In other words, the same areas that spend decades trying to manage their economies to eliminate poverty and inequality. That's according to the same World Inequality Database founded by Piketty himself. The main problem is inequality isn't poverty. Reducing inequality by making everyone poorer is no victory. For the billions of people lagging behind, their way out is economic growth, the kind that can only happen with healthy markets, strong property rights protection, and free trade. As the saying goes, socialism is the belief that it's better to be equal in poverty than unequal in prosperity. That's not a straw man, and Piketty just proved it. So all of that makes Thomas Piketty this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Have You Ever Been in a Turkish Prison edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support, and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord, Patreon, or Subscribe Star, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Thomas Sowell. We will do almost anything for our visions, except think about them. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.